Hello chess fans, this is Rick from Chess to Impress with coverage of round 3 of the 2018 Candidates Tournament, and we saw something very special happen in this round. It was played on Monday, March 12th, and these were the pairings: Sergei Karyakin against Alexander Grishuk, Levon Aronian against Vladimir Kramnik, Fabiano Caruana against Shahryar Mamedyarov, and Wesley So against Ding Liren. I'll tell you about the results at the end of the video, but first let's look at the game between Levon Aronian with white and Vladimir Kramnik with black. And fasten your seatbelts, because this was quite an amazing game. Historically, the players have played 38 games against each other already. 27 of those games were draws. Kramnik won 7 of them and Aronian won 4. This was the handshake at the start of the game. And another picture after the third move from white. Let's have a look at the game. Aronian was white and opened with e4, and that was already a big surprise for Kramnik, as Aronian is not an e4 player. So all Kramnik's preparation on the d4, c4, knight f3 first moves was already useless. He replied e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop b5, the Ruy Lopez, the Spanish, and knight f6. Kramnik is going to go into the Berlin defense, which he has a lot of experience with. It's a very popular opening as well, but of course this was the famous opening that Kramnik used when he became world champion in the year 2000, defeating the great Garry Kasparov. Kasparov was not able to get anything against Kramnik's Berlin wall in that match. d3, and that is avoiding the endgame. I will not show you the variation, but there's a famous variation where the queens get swapped very quickly and black's king loses its castling rights and we get an endgame. And that was actually the endgame that Kasparov tried to win desperately against Kramnik in 2000, but was not able to. But d3 avoids that, and it's clear that Aronian wants a more complicated battle. Bishop c5 from Kramnik, bishop takes c6, d takes c6, and now you should not think that you can take the pawn on e5, because then there is queen d4, and that is a double attack. It's a checkmate threat, and the knight is hanging. Of course, Aronian did not fall for that. He castled. Now queen e7. Now you have to protect that e5 pawn. And the main move to do that with is knight back to d7, which also protects a pawn, but that blocks in this bishop. And Kramnik explained after the game that he wanted to develop that bishop to g4, so he did not want to block it. h3 is a logical move from Aronian, because that is against the bishop g4 move. And if white does not play that, and black can get bishop g4 in, then he has a perfectly fine game, and white will find it difficult to get an opening advantage. But here the fireworks start already on move 7. Look at this move, rook g8, immediately played by Kramnik. And he called it afterwards a killer. He even claimed that black is better after this move. He had prepared it years ago, he had found this move years ago, had not been able to use it yet, and was able to use it in this crucial game in the Candidates Tournament. He explained afterwards that he also looked at h6 back then, and then pushing g5, but then he got the idea of playing rook g8, and that followed by g5 and g4. It's saving the tempo. It's saving the tempo by not playing h7, h6. So rook g8 was played by Kramnik. King h1, according to both players, the only move, because g5 will become, and that's a very strong move. King g1 gets the king out of the rook line and also out of the bishop, which pins this pawn. So king h1 is a useful move, and according to Kramnik, the only move. And now knight h5. Judith Polgar, Grandmaster Judith Polgar in the live broadcast says, oh, Kramnik is looking to finish this game in 20 moves. It's a very aggressive move. And Kramnik said afterwards that this was the only move he could remember from his preparation from a few years ago. Of course, he had not prepared this for this game. He had not expected Aronian to play e2, e4 on the first move, so this was not part of his preparation. He had to dig deep in his memory to remember what he had analyzed a few years ago. Knight h5. Here it's important to see that you cannot develop the bishop to e3 to neutralize this strong bishop, because then there is bishop takes e3, and if you take back there is a knight fork on g3. It's check and you will lose in exchange. After the game the players said that probably Aronian should have played knight c3 here. They both agreed on that, and then they looked at this line, g5, knight takes e5, and of course that knight can be taken, but white is also attacking that knight. They looked at g4, d4, g takes, g3 to keep the king side closed, not open any lines, knight f6, d takes c5, queen takes e5, swapping a piece in an unusual way, bishop f4, queen takes e5, and bishop takes c7. This was a line that was looked at by both players after the game, and this is about equal. So after knight h5 it looks like Aronian should have played knight c3. But he played another piece to c3, he played c2, c3, with the idea to play d4. Here g5, and as they said in the live broadcast, if you say A, which was knight h5, then you also have to say B, g7, g5. On move 9, black lashes out with g5. In this picture you see Aronian-Kramnik executing that move g7, g5. And this is a nice picture where he's racking his brain, Aronian-Kramnik is, trying to remember his analysis from a few years back. And here are some tweets from Grandmaster Nigel Short. He said, "It is a joy to see that with his caveman patzer moves, Kramnik has already obtained a dangerous initiative." And then he says, "I love Kramnik's 7 rook g8. It's like the sort of crap I play in Blitz." You can always count on Nigel Short for a one-liner or two. So back to the game. After g5, Aronian took the pawn on e5. And at the same time attacking that knight. After the game both players looked at the move d4 instead, and then they looked at g4, and then Aronian said, well, I can take on c5, and Kramnik said, and I'll take on f3, queen takes f3, and queen h4, and Kramnik's opinion was that this is terribly dangerous as I am entering with my pieces. What both players had missed is that in this line after d4, g4 instead of d takes c5, which was their line, white can take on g4 and is attacking 2 black pieces. This is good for white. But okay, even those top grandmasters don't see everything. In the game knight takes e5 was played and Kramnik played g4. If you say A and you say B, then you also have to say C and keep going with that pawn, trying to destroy the protection around white's king. Here Aronian played d4, according to Kramnik the only move. They had a look at, this is a nice variation, knight takes g4 instead, and then bishop takes g4, h takes g4, but then we have queen h4 check, king g1 only move, and knight g3, and the next move is checkmate. The knight cannot be taken because of the bishop pinning the f-pawn. So after g4, d4 from Aronian, bishop back to d6, and now g3 to keep the queen out of h4. Another a nice mating variation is this one that they looked at in the analysis after the game, which is knight takes g4 instead of g3. Then there is bishop takes g4, h takes, and there comes the queen into h4, check, king g1, and checkmate. This is how quick it can go if you're not careful. So after bishop d6, g3 was played by Aronian. Kramnik took the knight, was taken back, and queen takes e5. Here Aronian played queen d4 and said afterwards that it was stupid to go for this. I didn't realize how bad my position was. I thought it was slightly worse and could fight for a draw after the queen swap. But Kramnik did not swap the queens. If he had done that, queen takes d4, c takes, and then g takes h3, and black has an extra pawn in this endgame. After 15 moves, an extra pawn with black is not bad at all, and he can play for two results, either a draw or he could win this game. Kramnik said afterwards that he was tempted to go for this. He likes better endgames, he's an endgame wizard, but he decided not to go for it. After queen d4, he retreated his queen to e7. He said, this was a difficult move to make. By swapping the queens I could have a better endgame without any risk, and I like better endgames, but I decided to play for mate. h4 from Aronian and c5 from Kramnik, hitting the queen. Kramnik said here black develops his bishop from c8 and castles long and starts mating white, who has very vulnerable light squares around his king. And of course that is really felt because black has a light squared bishop and these squares are indeed quite weak, and white does not have his light squared bishop anymore to protect those squares. After c5, Aronian decided to go to c4 with his queen, and calling this a terrible blunder afterwards, he said he forgot that black is threatening f5, as we'll see in the game. They looked at this variation instead of going to c4 to go to d3, and then bishop d7, and c4, this is what Kramnik said, to get the knight to c3 and white can fight for a draw. They looked a few moves further, castling queenside from black, knight c3, bishop c6, knight e5, queen e5, and white can fight was the conclusion. But queen c4 was played by Aronian, and that is going the wrong way. Bishop e6 hitting the queen, and now in the interview afterwards, the press officer Anastasia Karlovich asked, what about queen d3? To stop the f5 move. Well, both players said that is not good because of rook d8. Queen steps back to c2 and then bishop c8, and Aronian called this hopeless for black. So they dismissed the press officer's suggestion. The engine doesn't completely agree, but this is probably very difficult to play in a practical game for white. Black has an easy attack. Back to the game. After bishop e6, the queen went to b5 with check, c6, and queen a4. And here comes the move that Aronian overlooked, f5. And this is a good moment to have a look at white's queen side. Look at these three pieces, they are still at home. Aronian has not been able to develop them yet, and that means that the white king does not have enough defenders. Of course, also the queen is on the other side of the board. Here, both players looked at e takes f5, which was not played. This is a nice variation. Knight takes g3, sacrificing the knight. You have to take, and then bishop d5 check, king g1, and queen e2, and Kramnik said that is the main point of f5, and if white does not take, so does not play e takes f5, so black gets f4 in, as we'll see in the game, then he's totally winning in the mating attack. So let's see how that happens. So after f5, Aronian did not take, he decided on bishop g5. Kramnik did not have to think long about his exchange sacrifice that he made here. Rook takes g5, h takes g5, and f4. Kramnik said he was walking around while Aronian was thinking, and while thinking about his position, of course, those top grandmasters can think about a position. When walking around, they do not need to see the board and pieces. He said he could not see anything for black. He says it's just f4 and then mate is coming. Aronian played his queen back to d1, rook d8 hitting that queen, queen stepped aside, and f takes g3. Knight a3, finally bringing that knight into the game, but not to a great square. Rook d3, infiltrating in white's position. Rook d1 from Aronian. And now Kramnik said that he wanted to finish the game in a beautiful way, which is, as he said, maybe not very professional, and I was afraid to miscalculate anything, but he still played it after checking it many times. He played a beautiful move, bishop d5. What a move that is. The rook is hanging, the bishop is hanging, and black already has a sacrifice in exchange. Yes, you really have to calculate this to make sure it works, and it does. You cannot take the bishop because of queen e4 check, and this leads to checkmate. We'll see so many checkmate variations that I will not show this one till the end, but it is checkmate. You can look at it for yourself. It's not very difficult. And if you take the rook, then there's also queen takes e4 check, and that leads to checkmate. So in the end, Aronian decided to play f3. G takes f3, and if you now take the rook, there is a absolutely wonderful checkmate. Kramnik had seen it all. Rook takes d3, then there's queen takes e4. And after rook e3, which looks very strong, because it's pinning the queen to the king, and of course the rook is protected. Is white winning here? No, he's not. f2 check, rook takes e4, check, and bishop takes e4, checkmate. Look at this picture. Print it, frame it, put it on your wall. This is an absolutely beautiful checkmate, which could have appeared on the board, but it did not. After g takes f3, Aronian did not take the rook, he took the bishop. Queen e2 from Kramnik. Rook e1, again pinning the queen, but black wins after g2 check. Aronian resigned here. There's nothing to play for. This was the variation that Kramnik showed in the interview after the game. He showed king h2, and then g1 queen, king takes, f2 check, king h1, and there's different ways to win. Kramnik showed knight g3 check, king g2, and f takes e1 queen. And then he said, or maybe f takes e1 knight, double check. And that actually is the quickest mate. King h3, queen h5 is checkmate. What a game. Crushing a player like Aronian with black in 27 moves with all these wonderful variations and this beautiful mating attack on the white king. A few more pictures. Levon Aronian during the game, he saw what was coming and didn't look very happy. This is the position after the miracle move bishop d5 from Kramnik, and Aronian is thinking how he can get out of this, and of course he could not. This is the moment of resignation. Aronian extends his hand and congratulates Kramnik on this remarkable victory. A happy Vladimir Kramnik after the game, and Nigel Short said, "Simply brilliant chess by Vlad Kramnik. I take my hat off to him. Outstanding. Love it." The results of round 3, Karyakin, Grishuk a draw. We saw the wonderful game from Aronian against Kramnik. Caruana Mamedyarov was the longest game of the round, also ended in a draw. A very interesting endgame with lots of passed pawns everywhere. And So Ending played a quick draw, so Wesley So finally, after losing in the first 2 rounds, has finally got on the scoreboard. The standings after round 3, Vladimir Kramnik 2.5 out of 3. Half a point behind Mamedyarov and Caruana, who played a draw against each other today. Ding and Grishuk are both on 50%. Ding with 3 draws. Grishuk with a win, a loss and a draw. Aronian and Karyakin are on 1 point, and So, as I said, is in the tournament now with half a point. Round 4 will be played on Wednesday, March 14th, which means Tuesday, March 13th will be a rest day for the players. And on the 14th we'll see Grishuk against Ding, Mamedyarov against Wesley So, Kramnik, Caruana and Karyakin against Aronian. I will be here after the round to tell you what happened. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and please subscribe to the Chess to Impress channel. Please leave a comment, and if you like the video, it would be great if you could share it on social media. There's a lot of attention to this tournament, a lot of attention to chess in these few weeks, so it's a great opportunity to grow the channel. So if you are a faithful viewer of Chess to Impress, it would be great if you could indeed share the videos if you like them on social media and see if we can get the channel to grow a bit more. You also may want to check out my Chess2 Progress channel. The link is in the description box. This is Rick for Chess to Impress. Thank you for watching.